Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about the top 10 edge rushers in the 2024 NFL draft class based on data. So we're going to be looking at production, athleticism, and other statistical factors. Stay tuned until the end of the video where we reveal who the top prospect is at the edge rusher position based on data. With an overall look. But before I start the show, I just want to remind everybody that the 2024 NFL Draft Analytics Guide is available for purchase. Link is in the description. It's the 9th annual guide that I have made thus far, and it is by far the best, most robust data guide out there, guys. So definitely recommend you guys check that out. So in terms of evaluating defensive edge rushers, there's a couple different metrics that I use. I just want to go over overview of these metrics before we get into the top 10. One of those is defensive market share production data. So it's a raw statistic divided by the individual statistic divided by the team statistic, which gives you a percentage of the defense they made in various statistics. So like solo tackle market share, sack market share, TFL market share, etc. Then, of course, athleticism data. This is mass density athleticism data. So I look at the edge rusher position based on their athleticism for their size. So speed score, explosion score, flexibility score, all those different types of things are the things that I utilize in terms of this particular metric. Then adjusted production is contextual production because it adjusts their production for their age, their level of competition, and the team that they played on. So, for example, if they played at Alabama, how good of a team was Alabama that year? There are statistics that show you how strong of a team they were on for their college team that go all the way back as far as you can imagine. There's also statistics that show you strength of schedule data as well. So all those statistics are added together to give adjusted production traits, and there's correlations to it, which we'll get to with the number 10 edge rusher in the 2023 NFL draft class is Alabama's Chris Braswell. He had a 72.83 out of 100 data grade. Pros, he has elite speed and above average sack/TFL market share. Cons, he does not have elite production and has average explosiveness. And best fit for him probably would be a 3-4 outside linebacker or rush linebacker position for him based on his size profile. But taking a look at his production data, as you can see, 33 percentile in terms of solo tackle market share. That's not a number that you want to see when it comes to the edge rusher position. This is not a production area or pattern that doesn't work in the NFL. There definitely are a handful of prospects. D Ford is probably the most missionable one, who went on to become pretty successful. But overall, it's not the best production traits that you would want at the position. Then, of course, when you get to his other market share data, such as forced fumbles, pass deflections, those numbers are very good in terms of forced fumbles, but not so much in terms of pass deflections. Then when we get to his athleticism traits, as you can see, 49 percentile in terms of explosiveness. He has average explosiveness if you just round up. His speed score is 91 percentile. So no agility testing, though. Most of the Alabama players didn't test in terms of agility, which is a shame. But we do have at least his speed score, which is a very valuable metric indeed at the position. Taking a look at his adjusted production traits, he had a 69 percentile age score, 66 percentile MSA rating, and then a 72 percentile in terms of his pass rating. As you can see, the starter averages at the position, which is essentially the block that's right over here in the middle. That block in particular is he's close to it, but he's not exactly there. So there's a reason why he's number 10 on this list, and those are the main reasons why. Of course, we get to number 9 on this list, which is Nelson Caesar from Houston. Pros, he had elite sack market share, near elite TFL market share, and above average speed. Cons, the level of competition, and lacks elite athleticism traits. He had a 73.27 out of 100 data grade. Based on his edge rusher market share, he had a 61 percentile in terms of solo tackle data, 90 percentile in terms of sack, and 87 percentile in terms of tackle for loss. So he was extremely productive. It was at Houston, though, so he wasn't exactly playing against the toughest competition ever. But these are decent numbers to have at the position for him. And then, of course, when you look at his other market share traits, this is kind of where his profile kind of took a dip. Non-existent forced fumble data, non-existent pass deflection data, not really utilized that much in terms of those different areas right there. Taking a look at athleticism traits, as you can see, above average speed with below average explosiveness and below average flexibility. There are edge rushers that can win with this particular trait, but oftentimes they have to be in blitzes and moved around and those types of things to really have an impact at the next level. So if he were to go to a team, say like the Kansas City Chiefs or the Pittsburgh Steelers or any team that utilizes linebackers in terms of blitzing the passer, he would fit really well in those particular systems. So, I mean, there's a reason why he's number 9. He does lack the athleticism traits that you want out of a long-term starter. But this is just kind of how this edge rusher class is. There's a lot of players that have a lot of question marks, and he's one of them. Then, of course, we can look at his adjusted production. Similar boat to Chris Braswell in terms of his adjusted production traits. Not near the starter averages overall, but definitely close enough to where you could see him as a potential starter at the next level. Then, of course, we get to number 8 on this list, which is Chop Robinson from Penn State. I know some of you guys might be like, number 8? I don't know. He's a little bit of a debate player because I have seen some. I was surprised because I thought that Chop Robinson was going to be universally loved by everybody, but there seems to be the same level of caution that I have about him that other evaluators have about him. But this is the tail of the tape with him. His pros, he has elite athleticism traits and a good age score. So based on that, if you draft him, you're going to be drafting him based on his potential. Not on the player that he is right now, but on the player that he could be once you get him on your team and you coach him up and do all those other sort of things with him. So similar vein to players like Clay Matthews is an example of a player like that. Ezekiel Anza, those are players who were kind of like that, where they had the athleticism traits but didn't really put it all together. And a recent example of a type of player like that kind of failed a little bit was Trayvon Walker, who had very similar production traits, which we're going to get to Chop Robinson's production in a little bit once we get to the next slide. But this is kind of the type of player that you're looking at here. You know, he has the potential to be the best edge rusher from this class, just from an athleticism standpoint. But because of his other statistics, it lowers his chance of success, his statistical chance of success. And the biggest thing I have to remind everybody on is that these data grades are based on who has the highest percentage of success. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the best player out of this draft class. As with anything in terms of probability, you're not always going to be 100% right. So you have to kind of take some of these rankings with a grain of salt. But he is one of those players that I would say, based on his athleticism traits, he does have the potential to be the best player from this class at the edge rusher position. But he's a massive risk because of all the things that I just mentioned in terms of below average production traits overall. His data grade is 75.22 out of 100. Best fit would probably be a 3-4 rush linebacker. Taking a look at his production traits, as you can see, 38 percentile in terms of his solo tackle data, 38 percentile solo tackle, 34 percentile sack, and then 39 percentile TFL. Taking a look at his other statistics in terms of forced fumbles, pass deflections, those types of things, he's average to a little above average in some of those metrics, but it's nothing elite. And then, of course, when you look at his edge rusher athleticism traits, this is what you're buying, okay? If you believe that you can take this athleticism and turn it into something elite, then more power to you. It definitely is possible, but this is kind of what you would be betting on, is what he might be in the future versus what he is now, because what he is right now is a backup to reserve player because of his production traits. Then we get to his adjusted production. As you can see, his age score is probably his most impressive adjusted production trait. 97 percentile in terms of his age. He is a young prospect, so when you draft a player who's young, there is that potential that they could develop. When you take a guy who's 25 years old, he's already at his peak athletically speaking, and also mentally to a certain extent, in terms of the prefrontal cortex and their decision-making abilities. With a guy like Chop Robinson, he's still developing. His brain is still developing. His athleticism is still developing. He could become even more athletic than what he is right now, based on what he is right now in terms of his age. So That's the potential there with him as a prospect. And that's why, again, I'm talking more about him than other players because I do understand that this does seem low, but when you look at his other adjusted production traits, the risk is there with him. Then, of course, when you get to number 7, Marshon Nurn from Western Michigan. Pros, he had elite flexibility and near elite athleticism overall. Cons, level of competition, obviously, at Western Michigan, and production was not elite. His data grade is 75.84 out of 100. His best fit is as a 4-3 defensive end. So a guy that's more likely going to put his hand in the dirt at the next level. Taking a look at his production traits, 79th percentile in terms of solo tackle data, pretty much average in terms of sack market share and tackle for loss market share. Take a look at his other production traits, forced fumble market share, pass deflection market share. All those numbers are not exactly where you want them to be. And then when you look at his athleticism traits right here, 88th percentile in terms of explosiveness, 96th percentile in terms of flexibility, with 76th percentile in terms of speed. Another player, kind of like Chop Robinson, but with more production, not as young though, that could do some impressive things is Marshon Nurn because of his athleticism traits. And then, of course, when you get to the next trait to talk about, which is his adjusted production, worse than Chop Robinson and Chris Braswell and all the other players. The biggest reason why Nurn is so high is because he has better production and better athleticism traits, but his adjusted production traits are not exactly where you want them to be in terms of long-term starter outcomes. So he is a risk to potentially become nothing at the next level because of his production adjusted for his level of competition, his age, and his strength of schedule. Taking a look at number 6 on this list, we have a small school prospect in Jalix Hunt from Houston Baptist. Pros, near elite explosiveness with above average size and production. Cons, level of competition. Data grade 78.95 out of 100. Best fit would be a 3-4 outside linebacker. Taking a look at his production traits. Now, this was against the lower level competition, so his production traits are in the starter averages, but keep in mind this is at Houston Baptist. So a lot of times edge rushers from lower level competition, they typically have to be much better than this. You're talking 90 plus percentile. Jared Allen, for example, is probably the player I always mention because he had 90 plus percentile, probably 99 percentile in terms of solo tackle data, sack data, and TFL data at his college, his lower level division college. So these are not exactly the numbers you want to see in terms of getting a Jared Allen-like prospect, but they are at least good enough that he could potentially become something special at the next level, or at least a starter based on his overall production traits. Take a look at his other production traits here. Forced fumbles and pass deflections, slightly above average. Not bad, but nothing special. And then, of course, when you get to his edge rusher athleticism, 86 percentile in terms of explosiveness, 75 percentile in terms of speed, and 65 percentile in terms of flexibility for his size. And his adjusted production traits, similar situation as the guy I just mentioned, Marshon Nurn, but he's mainly dropped because of his level of competition and his age to a certain extent. Taking a look at number 5 on this list, we have Muhammad Kamar from Colorado State. Pros, elite sack market share, elite speed, and near elite tackle for loss market share. Cons, level of competition, data grade, 79.84 out of 100, and he is listed, or at least I would put him as a 3-4 rush linebacker because of his size. Taking a look at his production traits. Great production at Colorado State, 93 percentile in terms of sack market share, 84 percentile in terms of tackle for loss market share. Take a look at his other data points. Forced fumbles, above average. Production in that particular area, and pass deflections is slightly below average, but it's not bad. Then, of course, we look at athleticism traits. He had a very similar athleticism to his production in that he had a 92 percentile speed score. So he has a 90 plus percentile sack score with a 92 percentile speed score. So this could be something interesting, guys. He is one of those prospects. He is small school. I did make a video on him earlier this year, which I don't think too many of you guys watched, but he has those level of competition issues with him, but because of how he tested as an athlete, I think there might be something here. There might be something here that you might be able to get from him. Then, of course, when you get to his adjusted production traits, nowhere near the starter averages at the position in terms of the age, pass, and MSA, but he is close. He's closer than a lot of the prospects we've covered so far, so there is a chance there. Then, of course, we get to number 4 on this list, which is Brennan Jackson from Washington State. Pros, near elite production and above average athleticism overall. Cons, does not have any elite athleticism traits or elite production. Data grade 82.96 out of 100. Best fit would be a 4-3 defensive end. Brennan Jackson is one of those prospects this year that hasn't really got a lot of hype, but he's just really solid in every single thing. He's like the Will Shipley of running backs in this particular draft class, because he's good in everything, but he's not elite in anything. Except for maybe sack market share, which is the biggest thing that Brennan Jackson is really good at. Then, of course, when you look at his other statistics, forced fumble market share, pass deflection market share, all those numbers are decent, not great, but decent. And then, of course, you look at his athleticism trait, 78 percentile in terms of speed is probably his best trait. His best statistic is sacks. His best trait is speed. So very similar to the guy we just mentioned in terms of Kamar, where there might be something here. Because of athleticism, because of the production traits, he does have some level of competition things, some age things here and there that are floating in the wind, but in a very weak edge class, which this is in, because again, he had like an 80 percentile score, which is not the best score you want to have. That's not a first round pick. That's somebody you probably want to take more so in the day 2 area of the draft or lower based on his overall data grade. But this is not a bad data profile. It really isn't. Then, of course, we get to his adjusted production traits. He's a little bit closer to the starter averages here. So we're starting to get the top 4 edge rushers that I'm about to mention have the best chance to become long-term starters. They're very close to what most long-term starters look like in terms of their data, if you will. Then, of course, we get to number 3 on this list, which is Latu Latu from UCLA. Pros, near elite production and near elite athleticism traits. Cons, below average age and below average explosiveness. Data grade is 85.36 out of 100. His best fit is as a 4-3 defensive end. I know I'm going to get a lot of Latu fans out there that are going to hate this video because of this ranking right here, but don't hate me, hate the data, okay? I did not make these rankings for my personal opinion. This is based on the data. And the biggest things that hurt Latu, which we're going to talk about here, why he isn't the top edge rusher in this class, is because of, one, his production traits. He had great sack and TFL market share, 87 percentile, 89 percentile in terms of sack and TFL, but he had 70 percentile in terms of solo tackle market share. That's a good number to have, but it's more so in the starter averages of the position. It's not in the Pro Bowl averages, the All-Pro averages of the position. So he's more so in the starter area in terms of his solo tackle data versus his sack and his tackle for loss data. Then when you look at his other production traits, he's great in terms of forced fumble market share, great in terms of pass deflection market share, athleticism. This is one of the first knocks. Below average explosiveness, 33 percentile in terms of his explosiveness. Now that does hit at least the Pro Bowl threshold at the position. 81 percentile in terms of speed, 80 percentile in terms of flexibility for his size, but he's not exactly in the starter averages in terms of explosiveness, nor is he in the starter averages, or Pro Bowl averages, I should say, in terms of explosiveness. So he does lack explosiveness. He has great speed and flexibility and bendability. I would say the best comparison for him based on this particular data profile would be maybe somebody like Joey Bosa, like a faster Joey Bosa is kind of the best sort of comparison for him. An older and faster Joey Bosa, which is where we get into age, which is again the biggest thing that also draws him back is his age. He had a 31 percentile age score, great MSA rating, great pass rating. His pass rating is pretty much in line with the starter averages of the position, but it's not with the Pro Bowl averages, it's not with the All-Pro averages of the position. So again, he would be more so an outlier if he was to do really, really well. Now, does this mean that he's a bust? Absolutely not. I think Latu has a great chance to be one of the better edge rushers, and not the best edge rusher from this draft class, because just because you have a high data grade doesn't mean you're going to hit. But he does have concerns. His age is the biggest thing that drops him based on data, and age is definitely a big statistic when it comes to the averages at the All-Pro, Pro Bowl, and starter level. There are explanations, of course, because of history, medical issues, those different kinds of things, but it just is what it is. But that's Latu. Now, getting to number 2 on this list, we have Jonah Ellis from Utah. Pros, elite flexibility and near elite explosiveness, elite production traits overall. Cons, did not test in the 40-yard dash, so we don't know his 40. And then data grade 93.93 out of 100. Best fit would be a 3-4 rush linebacker. Now, I don't really know how the NFL feels about Jonah Ellis. Everybody wants to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. and Frank Gore Jr. And they want to talk about, I'm trying to think the other juniors, Brendan Rice. Everybody wants to talk about these players from other players. Chris Jenkins Jr., all those types of players. Jonah Ellis is the son of a former Pro Bowl defensive lineman in this particular draft class, in Luther Ellis. And I understand that going to 2 Pro Bowls might not be the most impressive thing to you guys, and I don't think many of you guys probably even saw Luther Ellis. I mean, well, some of you probably did, but he's in the same vein as those other players to a certain extent. Obviously he doesn't have a Hall of Fame dad, but he has a NFL dad that used to play in the NFL and was really good in the NFL. And I think that's the thing about Jonah Ellis in terms of his overall data profile. He's got a chance to be really good. When you look at his market share production traits, 82 percentile, 93 percentile, 92 percentile in terms of solo tackle, sacks, tackle for loss. That's great. Then, of course, you get to his edge rusher market share, 47 percentile, 76 percentile in terms of pass deflection data, 47 in terms of forced fumble data. That's great numbers as well. Then, of course, you look at his edge rusher athleticism traits. 83 percentile in terms of explosiveness, 58 in terms of speed, which is his projected speed score. So I just used the speed score for NFLDraftScout.com. He might run slower. He might run faster. I really don't know. But I just needed to have some sort of 40-yard dash kind of put in there. So, but either way, great explosion numbers, great flexibility numbers. Even if he ran a slower 40, he would still have a great flexibility score. And then, of course, when you get to his adjusted production traits, he is in the All-Pro averages, the Pro Bowl averages of the position in terms of his adjusted production traits. So Jonah Ellis has the potential to be the best edge rusher in this draft class, and absolutely nobody is talking about him, except for maybe me. But that's why he is number 2. He does have some drawbacks. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some things that are not the best, but I would say that there are a lot of decent things as well. Then we get to number 1 on this list, which is, of course, I think it's a little anticlimactic to a certain extent, which is Dallas Turner from Alabama. Pros, elite explosiveness and speed. Cons, strength of schedule is writing checks. His production did not cash. More developmental than you'd like out of a 90-plus percentile prospect. Data grade is 96.77 out of 100. His best fit is as a 3-4 rush linebacker. So here's why Dallas Turner is the top data linebacker in this class. Starting with his production traits. His production is pretty much within the starter averages at the position. When you look at his solo tackle data, sack data, TFL data, all those numbers are pretty decent. They're not elite, which we're going to get to, but they are decent. When you look at his other production traits, great forced fumble market share, below average pass deflection market share. What can you do? Then, of course, you get to athleticism traits, 90-plus percentile in terms of explosiveness, 97 percentile in terms of speed. Did not do any agility testing, which I am not happy about, but ain't much I can do about it. I got to go with what I know, and what I know is explosiveness and speed is what I got. And then, of course, when you look at his adjusted production traits, 97 percentile age score, 93 percentile MSA rating, 88.78 percentile in terms of his pass rating. The bottom line is with Dallas Turner is Latu Latu is a much more developed pass rusher. I think anybody would agree with that. I think in terms of being a technical pass rusher, which again, he's one of the oldest pass rushers of this draft class, so he better be a very technical pass rusher. That's the thing that you're really betting on with Dallas Turner, is that he develops those pass rush moves at the NFL level, that he develops those counters, that he develops the mental part of the game in terms of setting plays up as an edge rusher, which there is that similar mindset with edge rushers, that you're trying to set things up with offensive tackles so that you're able to kind of take advantage of things and get them to kind of get faked a little bit, and then you get that move, and then you're found the inside, and then you get that sack, or you get that pressure on the quarterback. Dallas Turner has not really shown to do all those things. Dallas Turner, a lot on film, has shown instances where a lot of his production was based on blitzes, based on the design of the defense more than anything else, and it shows based on his production. You know, he got bare minimum production for a starter average. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that he could probably be like a Brian Burns like pass rusher. You know, Brian Burns, of course, is one of those players that, based on his overall data at the NFL level, he's a good pass rusher. But most of his sacks, most of his production comes through blitzes, comes through moving him around and kind of making matchups and different things. You know, defensive design, defensive scheme kind of really helps him out a lot to be productive. With Dallas Turner, that's what you're betting on, potential. That's what you're betting on. And again, this is a data grade. So just because he has the top data grade in this class doesn't mean that Dallas Turner has to be your top edge rusher. But this is why he's number one, but this is also the second part, which is, as a talent evaluator, I don't necessarily believe I would have Dallas Turner as my top edge rusher on my board based on if I was on a team or I was working for a team, because it's too risky. It's very risky. It's a very risky prospect. He's young. He's very athletic, but he's not. I mean, again, there's those other things about him that are not the best. But he is number one based on data. You saw all the data. You can kind of understand why he's number one. But if you like other videos like this, check out these videos right here. Also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. Check out my ex, formerly known as Twitter account at Geometrics, and please go to my Twitter account, go to the link below, and purchase the 2024 NFL Draft Analytics Guide, the 9th annual guide, 678 beautiful pages of player profiles and statistics and data and everything else like this on there. So please go check that out if you have opportunity, and buy your copy today. You won't be disappointed. And if you have a problem with it, definitely mention and talk to me about it. But I think you'll like it. I think you're gonna like the way when you read it. Okay, so thank you. Peace.